Thank you very much. Feel privileged to be here with such a distinguished panel. Thank you for the organizer of Singapore Maritime Week and the Marine Tech event. As this is the last panel and all of us a little bit tired, so let's try to understand who is still here. So let's start in a short exercise. How many corporate executives we have here in the audience? Please raise your hand. Okay. Investors? You're not too engaging, you know. How about startup founders? Okay, I want to meet you afterwards. So please, before we start and talking about the different questions, so please, each and every one, we start with you, Gwen. Who are you and why are you here?
Why am I here? That's a very good question. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us here in Singapore. Very happy to be on this amazing panel. So yeah, my name is Gwen Sally. I'm the CEO of ZBox. So we are an international network of accelerators, and we announced actually this morning the opening of our 5th hub in Singapore. So we were initiated in Marseille by the chairman and CEO of CMA CGM Group, Rodolphe Saadé. So we now have a hub in Marseille, France, in Guadeloupe, Caribbean, in Arlington, Virginia, in the US, and we are opening soon in Abidjan and in Manchester as well. So we focus on corporate interactions with startup, and yeah, our goal is to bring digitization and decarbonation through collaboration with startups.
Okay. Godspeed, Gwen. I also learned that you were a founder yourself, so this is impressive.
A long time ago.
Not like the rest of us. So, Mark, to you, all the way from the US.
Thank you. Mark Huang, co-founder of See Ahead. We opened the first blue tech ocean-focused incubator in Boston, and we also run a later stage accelerator in the US Gulf Coast outside of New Orleans. I'd say as a venture outfit in the States, including maritime, the blue ocean economy from an innovation perspective is still relatively a new concept. So we really are looking to bridge technologies to go out to sea, so to speak. And we also have an angel investment group, and we're raising a fund.
Nicolas, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicolas Priotis. Thank you first to the organizers for inviting us and having us over. And glad to see friends and co-investors here at the panel. I'm a VP of Technology Ventures for the Signal Group. So I run the venture arm, Signal Ventures. So I lead the investments for the group. The group itself is both a shipping business. So we run 2 pools of tanker vessels. But we also have our own software, Signal Ocean, which is a market intelligence tool for the chartering side of the business. And we recently launched Signal Ventures to promote innovation in the space. And there we do 2 things. We do both investments in startups directly, in third-party startups, with a global focus. But we also do our own incubation work. So we find entrepreneurs in residence that we bring in-house. We give them data, we give them support. We often act as design clients. And then once the product is ready, we help them with a spin-off of the business. Glad to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Sean, please.
Hi, can you hear me? Look, I really want to stress how privileged I am to sit beside all of you. You guys are like the OG of like maritime investment, so it's really, really cool for me. So my name's Sean. I'm the founder and general partner of Motion Ventures. Motion Ventures, we're an early stage venture investment fund. We invest specifically across the maritime supply chain. Our fund is backed by the largest maritime corporate consortium in the world. So we're backed by people like Lloyd's Register, MOL, IMC, Signal as well, and Stolt-Nielsen, and many, many more, right? So about 15 of them. And what we're trying to do here is to form a consortium to support the entrepreneurs that we invest in, right? We're trying to find a scaling pathway for them to do it a little bit better. We launched 2 years ago. I've invested into about 16 companies, looking to get to 25 by the end of this year. And really excited to be part of this group and have a discussion here today.
Thank you. Tim, please.
All right, thank you. I'm Tim, managing partner of TechPeer. Like Motion, we are VC focused on maritime and logistics startups, early stage. And indeed, it is a pleasure to be here on this panel. Thanks for having me with quite a few co-investors. And yeah, so our focus is very similar. We look at early stage B2B startups, trying to make shipping and logistics basically smarter, greener, and more resilient. And I'm very much looking forward to this discussion.
Okay, we will start with some question to the panel, but please feel free to ask a question and to offer questions during the panel, and I will make sure to involve you also. Mark, I want to start with you. Due to some peculiar combination of circumstances, the US is not a leading maritime entity like in other sectors. How do you see someone from the US, Boston, as technology hub supporting what is happening in the global maritime world, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. So we won't get into why the U.S. is not a maritime leader anymore, but what the U.S. is still a leader in is STEM-based venture innovation, right? The numbers are clear. Our hub is in Cambridge, in Kendall Square, middle of MIT's campus. It's not just MIT, but that university has the most number of patents of any standalone university in the US, number 3 in venture capital in the world. Down the street is number 2 is New York, and then of course the West Coast being number 1. So our model is similar to why there's clean tech and a lot of heavy energy in Boston. Boston's not a maritime city, Boston's not an energy city. So why, using the energy analogy, clean tech, why is, let's say, Greentown Labs the biggest clean tech incubator in Boston? It's because of that ecosystem produces a lot of STEM-based innovation, tech, material science, life science that can apply as well to blue tech, robotics, metallic 3D printing. So what we looking to do is be a bridge. And then your earlier question, which I didn't answer, is why am I here? Is because we see the tech. A lot of the technology startups don't know the bow from the stern, and they admit that. We need industry as a counterparty to say, this is what they're claiming, could this possibly work? So we're looking to be that bridge between the US leadership in venture innovation to industry, which is like here.
Thank you. Tim, to you, with all the good competition from across the pond, what you can share about your ecosystem and maybe one example to some startup, local startup even, that you are proud of from Germany or Europe?
You mean what kind of startups we're proud of that do what? Say again, what was the first part of the question?
I think that as representative of what is happening in Europe in venture, yes, I will be very happy, and maybe the audience, to hear what is happening in Germany and Europe as a whole, and what is the most exciting startup you invest in to date?
Well, I mean, where to start? I mean, Hamburg, Germany, where we are based, has also quite lively maritime startup ecosystem. So I guess that's a good start. And which is obviously where we, try to really work with the ecosystem. And we actually just recently did our 3rd investment in a Hamburg-based startup. Can actually share which one that is. It's right at the intersection of the maritime and logistics industries. It's about automating the container import processes. I think something that could also be interesting to others here to look at. And I'm quite excited about this. It's a bit of an outlier, but I guess it's part of what VC is about, right? To identify outliers from an investment perspective, from a business case perspective. And this particular startup, I like to call it not so much deep tech, it's deep sales. They're selling to a very small, very challenging group of potential customers, very cumbersome, very bureaucratic, very big, but once they win them, then huge network effects kick in, and you will see huge volumes handled by that platform, and it will create enormous efficiencies for container logistics, specifically on the import side, when you release containers and all the adjacent use cases that come with that. So that's a good example of what excites me.
It sounds like I should visit Hamburg soon.
I think you should, yes. And I think we all know which one we're talking about, at least you and me.
Maybe a second co-invest for us, yeah.
Indeed.
Sean is the local person that knows everything here around. What is the most exciting startups you see here, this region?
Yeah, I think it's... we've got a big portfolio, right? So I love all of them. So they're all well-performing. I love all of them, won't pick favorites. But I think the ecosystem is interesting. The ecosystem is interesting, and like Tim mentioned, it's deep sales, right? Not deep tech. And so if you look at the industry we're in, we're B2B, right? In a B2B context, rarely do we lead with technology, right? Which is different from B2C, right? We usually lead with technology in B2C. And that's because in a consumer-driven business, what you're trying to scale is distribution, right? In a B2B business, what you're trying to scale is service and value, right? And that's not necessarily a technological problem, right? So I'll try to answer your question. Sorry, I'm a bit long-winded. So as we move and look at what's happening in this industry right now, what's really evidenced this? People talk about digitization in maritime, or trying to digitize maritime. I'm not from the space, and I come in, and I think this space is fairly digital, right? They're just not in forms that we can use. You know, they come in all sorts of communication media, right? PDFs, emails, WhatsApp, Excel spreadsheet, and whatnot, right? And the difficulty here is labeling a lot of these data. They're unstructured. They're very difficult to use, and they're very difficult to draw insights from. It needs a lot of like massaging, right? But these problems have been solved in other industries, right? Banking, for example, insurance, for example. A lot of these places have solved that. So a lot of interesting companies we're seeing right now are able to use technology after they've got product market fit, right? After they've sold it to a business, they're able to integrate technology that helps sort of convert unstructured data to structured data, and sort of draw more insight from that, sort of make sort of more manual processes more efficient. I think those are things that are going to come. But it's a roadmap, right? So where are we headed towards, right? So as we get more structured data, then, and we scale structured data, and then it comes back to, it's kind of like a diverging, converging thing, right? It's sort of what like now generative AI, the problem that generative AI gives us, right? It's just able to create too much information, and how do we digest that, right? So the path goes back to diverging, I believe, in the next few years. But I see the same sort of roadmap with maritime.
Thank you. Nicholas, I want to continue with you. You know, Greece is like the cradle of modern shipping, and still the word first in ship owning. Is it becoming
Cradle of
also
civilization, not just.
Yeah. So now it's also become a maritime tech hub. What do you see in Greece?
Indeed, we see a lot of startups in shipping coming out of Greece now. Harbor Lab, Deep Sea, just a couple of examples. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you know, Greece has started becoming an innovative ecosystem in the last, 5 to 7 years, with a lot of VCs popping out and venture capital money. Obviously, it's a big hub, shipping hub, so there's a lot of clientele there. But I think the most important one is that shipping has always been the best employer in Greece. So a lot of the well-educated Greeks that went abroad to study and came back, they would find jobs in shipping. And now as that, there is this innovation wave, a lot of these people have started thinking, okay, how can I use some of the knowledge that I learned in university and apply it in shipping? So we have now cases like that people that worked in shipping companies leave to start their own businesses. So I think that's a trend that's going to continue, and we see a lot of Greek ship family businesses getting a lot more interested now in innovation. So they start investing in funds, they start investing directly in startups, and they actually start collaborating with the startups themselves. So I guess within that framework, we also decided first to start our own business in Signal Ocean and Signal Maritime back in 2014, but then also to support that innovation with investments directly in these startups. So, as I said in the beginning, we do both incubations and direct investments. So we've invested in quite a few startups that came out of Greece. But also on the incubation side, what we try to do is find expertise in the industry that has also that technology acumen. We bring them in-house, and then we help them develop a technology team that is based in Greece, because we also find now good technologies in Athens to support these products. And then commercially, we typically set up the teams abroad. because this is a place where Greece is lagging right now. We don't have the productizations that you find in Anglo-Saxon countries. So we would set up headquarters like we did with OilX in the UK. The founder is there, sales team is there, and then a tech team that support them in Athens.
Good points. And to the audience, Athens is also great for nightlife, which is also important for ecosystem building. So looking forward for the next visit in 2 weeks. Gwen, to you, I think you are unique here in the panel that you have choose a box, some kind of a global reach from France, US, and now here. What is the reason to choose those specific location around the world, and what is the differences that you can share about these different ecosystems?
Yeah, well, before starting with differences, I want to start with the common pain that we see across location. And it's really around having large organization like people in this room being able to interact with smaller startups. We know that technology and technological breakthrough happen kind of exponentially. Like we see technologies really developing rapidly. Lately, we've been talking a lot about AI and its implication and things like that. We talked about it this morning again. But large organizations and people don't have that exponential ability to change. And so having ecosystem facilitators kind of helping those large organizations and those startups working together, I think is essential. And this is what we're trying to do. So we start by we have over 20 corporate partners. We announced 3 this morning with PSA, Bureau Veritas, and Synergy Marine that we're very happy to be working with. And we start with their problems. What are you guys trying to solve? And then we identify, we source startups that are kind of ready to deploy their technologies, and we help them working together. And I think having that organization in between that does acculturation, both for the large organization, the large corporate, but also for the startups to learn how to work with a large corporate is essential. So this is something, a common issue that we see across location. And then in the differences, well, there is a difference in maturity, obviously. When we have a hub, for example, in the Caribbean, we do mainly incubation and we support the local ecosystem, where we know for sure that here in Singapore, we will be tackling more mature startups and more mature problematics. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to see the startup ecosystem being more and more involved within this industry, also because of decarbonization, which is going to be the carrot for everyone to accelerate the transformation. So yeah, I think the startup ecosystem is just starting to really embed itself within the industry.
Thank you. Looking forward to work together. I co-invest with the others here, so Godspeed also here.
Yes, big time.
Mark, you mentioned about harness technology excellence of founders and all the tech foundation of the US to industry that, unlike Greece, is not happening in the US. Can you share some specific successful use case of this tech transfer of technologies to the sector?
Sure, and I'll pick one that's digital, since that's the theme. We're in a co-working space, as I mentioned. It's pretty busy, and there's a young company called Vinci Virtual Reality. He used to put on his Oculus, and I thought he was gaming. Blocked my way to the coffee room around 5 p.m. and finally started to talk. His name is Eagle, and I said, "Eagle, what are you doing?" And he actually was doing a lot of workforce development training for the U.S. Army. Got to know him a little better, and he said, "Are you interested in the ocean?" And he's like, "I don't know anything about the ocean. So why don't you apply to our Blue Swell incubator?" He did. In the incubator, we introduced him to Siemens Gamesa, and Siemens came back and said, "We have almost an 80% dropout rate when we train offshore wind service technicians, because after all that training, a bunch of them get seasick, and then a bunch of others really get freaked out from the height when they're taken out to the North Sea." So basically, Siemens Gamesa funded him with the state of Massachusetts, which is building offshore wind turbines, to develop a training software suite, the first one really for offshore wind service technicians. So what's the takeaway is Eagle can code for anybody, but I like to think that because of the bridge that we're trying to have between that tech community and the coast and the ocean economy, he's now coding at sea. So what else could his VR package do on a coastal economy? If ammonia is going to be one of the fuels of the future, it's dangerous. So could Vinci VR be a future product suite on workforce training around fuels such as ammonia? Or when we're building all these new wind turbines on the US East Coast, very dangerous work, a lot of metal, a lot of weight. So we want him to stay in the ocean, but that's an example. Once again, I'll summarize this. He could code for anybody, but now he's coding for us.
Can I? Mark just said something extremely important, and I think this is the role of people here, but also people in the audience that interact with startups. Usually startups are founded and driven by people that know a niche industry really well. They are like engineers, they've been working towards something for a very long period of time, and sometimes, yeah, they miss use cases. And this is something that we see as well at ZBox within our startups. Like, they are extremely focused on one specific problem in the logistics sector, but they just didn't realize that this is also applicable to the space tech industry, for example. And I think this is the role of ecosystem facilitators, investors, mentors, to also like keep an eye on the macro trends and to help startups tackle other use cases that sometimes are not obvious to them.
Thank you. I want to combine pretty early some questions to the audience, from the audience, because there are too many. And Tim, maybe start with you, because you mentioned company that you already tap into, but we have a question here about what is the most interesting and emerging technology that you are looking to invest in, looking to the future. So please share your thoughts, and any other is ready to complement.
Happy to, and I think, there's for me, an obvious, maybe even unsophisticated answer is AI, because I do believe, I'm not buying into the hype per se, as in what you typically see with something new emerges and then everybody, oh my God, I'm losing my job tomorrow. No, not at all. But I do believe in the very foundational shifts that AI will bring about everywhere. And in a way, I think that applies to several here. We invested in a startup or two already that is, using AI, maybe not just branding it as such, but, once you start looking at the technology more thoroughly and trying to understand what it is, where it starts, what it can become, so AI is, I guess, to me, the most obvious answer to that question. There are other stuff as well that we are excited to invest in. Again, several here, we are software and software-enabled hardware-centric investors, especially leaning towards pure software plays, while we don't necessarily exclude hardware-centric stuff as well, right? If we were to invest in pure hardware cases, then it always boils down to who are our co-investors. Can they help us co-evaluate the technology risk that comes with such opportunities, right? Why am I mentioning this? Because obviously decarbonization next to digitalization are the two basic trends and challenges facing the industry at large and coming at it at the same time. So we are inclined to invest in both of these very fundamental trends, right, to help the industry digitize and decarbonize. And when you're looking at decarbonization, there are obviously quite a few solutions you can invest in. Whether that is, at a very early stage, invest in companies working on very, again, foundational solutions on the fuel side or related to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to add something about new technologies or new interest in your deal flow nurturing?
Yeah, sure, happy to. I think one that it's not a very, let's call it sexy technology, but it's something that, my background actually is aviation. I come from the aviation sector and spent many years in consulting, working with airlines, airports, etc. And I was actually very glad to hear today many people compare the shipping industry to the airline industry and how, the airline industry is basically 30 years ahead of shipping. When I was at college, they were already teaching us about 20 years ago about CDM, the collaborative decision making. which is basically tools that were developed between all the airline stakeholders, so the airlines, the airports, the ground handlers, the air traffic navigation systems, to improve the decision making and hence the operations and efficiency of the system as a whole. And that was started in Europe in the 90s. And still now in shipping in 2023, we cannot get there, right? And there are many reasons for it, right? There are conflicting incentives. You have the commercial operators and their relationship with the charterers and the whole notion of demurrage and lay time. So you have a very fragmented industry with a lot of different owners, operators, and terminal operators. So it's something that's very hard to change, but one technology that I would love to support is someone that takes the first stride towards some sort of port coordination. Obviously, the biggest hurdle to overcome there is that you need to bring on board a lot of these stakeholders. The software that you need to build doesn't seem to be that hard, right? But you need change management. You need to bring a lot of people on board. So that's something that we would definitely look to support. And I guess the second is, again, it was mentioned in the previous panel about electronic documentation. You cannot have in 2023, papers, and bill of ladings that move from ship to shore and to the bank and to the insurer, etc. And us as commercial manager, I think we would like to see it also on the charter party. So we cannot keep negotiating with the charterers and the brokers over email. So how can we change that? And because that will also allow them to put more innovative clauses in the charter parties, right? And potentially also enable collaborative decision making in shipping. If you bring in the electronic charter party more stakeholders in it.
Thank you. I hope there is some entrepreneurs in the audience that listen to you.
Can I offer a controversial
Definitely
view? Yeah, just to spice things up. So I think the technology itself is not important, right? I think we need to think about the purpose. What are we trying to achieve? And we should be agnostic to whether it's technology backed or not, largely, right? So I'll give an example. So Netflix, do we really care if they have AI technology behind the scene recommending me what to watch or not? Same for Spotify, same for Amazon, right? Do we really care? No, we care about the outcome of it, right? So same thing, what is the outcome that we care in shipping or maritime, right? So I think there are three most important things. One is the flow of goods, second is the flow of information, and third is the flow of money. And the objective function here is to collapse that, right? So if we can teleport goods or cargoes across the pond instantaneously, that's the dream, right? Everything else shouldn't matter as much. So then the technology comes in to facilitate that. Now, so who cares about technology? The people that care about technology should be the shareholders of the startup and the startup itself. Why? There are two things. One, technology gives them scale, right? That's important as you want to serve more clients, of course. Two, technology gives them defensibility, right? Gives them a moat. But as users or end customers, you wouldn't really care about technology, right? You just care about the outcome, right? And I think shipping is an extremely outcome-based industry.
Thank you. Very good insights. Fully agree with you. And I want to move to the next question from the audience that get a lot of votes to ask, so I will listen to the audience. And maybe this is related because the only way to succeed with a startup is to get real market traction regardless of technology. There is a question, do you feel, or anybody else, or bet, will be there any maritime tech unicorns in the few years to come? And if so, which one?
100%.
In which segment, in which business segment?
All our portfolio.
Well, there has already been
Let's meet again in 5 years.
There has already been one, and it was actually from Boston, right? Vesson. I mean, it's an old company, but they hit 1 billion, bro. I think it's an example that a lot of startups should have in mind. It's shipping, core shipping, right? Voyage management, and they made it, right? And then you have the whole, on the container side of things, which is a much bigger industry in terms of number of containers, number of operations, number of stakeholders. And I think a lot of the work that companies do there will probably lead to unicorns. Although I disagree with the notion that we should always have in mind to become a unicorn. I think in shipping you can have like a very successful business with that is not necessarily a unicorn, right? With very good returns.
Any other bet from the audience about potential unicorns?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I mean, unicorn per se, I mean, there are a lot of misconceptions about VC, about venture capital as a very, very specified asset class, in essence. Our job is to allocate capital to a very specific asset class, or not asset class, to a very specific type of companies. One term, I guess you can boil it down to, is portfolio construction. Our job is to construct portfolios in line with our investment strategies, right? What we say we want to do, and then build portfolios accordingly. And so our job is to obviously generate sufficient returns for our investors. And VC traditionally follows this power law dynamic, where you do need very big outcomes to drive fund returns. However, it's not that simplistic. There are very nuances to how you can actually create successful portfolios, even with unicorn outcomes. It really boils down to how you go about this portfolio construction exercise, that you figure out what opportunities are worthwhile to pursue, and even with, say, 9-figure outcomes can really generate great fund returns in the end. So that's our job. So you don't necessarily need unicorns, I think.
I agree.
But obviously I wouldn't mind. And I do believe I have a few in my portfolio.
So next subject, and I want to refer now to Gwen and also to you, Nicholas. There is a question that raised a lot of interest here in the audience. What is the recommendation for corporates who are structuring CVC? As a box started from CMA and pure CVC maybe from Signal. What is your recommendation to the corporate executives here in the audience about structuring a venture arm of?
Well,
Are you asking? Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Please.
I was about to say you don't need to because we built it so you can come work with us. That's one. And no, the second thing actually, it comes down to co-innovation. And that's why we set up ZBox the way we did it. I think there is a lot of brilliant minds across the value chain, not only within a single organization. CMA CGM is over 150,000 employees now, but we still set up the innovation network to be working with others. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to solve tough problems across a single value chain. So I think the power of co-innovation should be in the top of mind for corporates who are trying to innovate. And then when it comes to CVC specifically, which means investing directly into startups, well, is to have a strong thesis, and also to make sure that your thesis is well defined. We see a lot of CVCs out there that deploy capital with multiple check sizes, multiple verticals, because there is an interest for the core business. So just being able to frame from the get-go what you're going to try to do and to deploy and to invest in is important.
Your take?
So I was originally a marine engineer as a young man, left the shipyards, went back to school, and then 15 years in clean tech, helped start GE's corporate venture group in what was called clean tech, energy tech. So I think there's a lot of lessons. There's not lessons, but there's benchmarks with the transformation of the grid to renewables, automotive to electric, you mentioned aviation. So what did those traditional sectors and those players do, those corporates? They created corporate venture groups. Why? They weren't necessarily looking for an ROE. There was a thought, usually in the business development or even the CFO's office, is that the market is moving faster. We don't have a full grip on the changes. That could be regulatory. in a response to it. It could be market changes, consumer, or technology, or combination in regulatory, all of it. So the thought is, what are we missing? That's the first question. And from that, they invested in these funds, sometimes as little as 5 million. And the 5 million wasn't, once again, pushing an ROE. It was for, one is we have a team that goes where we don't hang out. We have a team that can move faster, the team that can work with these startups. They give us market intel. We can look over the shoulder of what's happening. If it's too early, we really like the idea of looking over the shoulder. Our name is not in the cap table. And eventually we have a hedge on how that technology, so not just the technology, but maybe we can engage with the startup 3 to 4 years from now, maybe we even buy them. So that model around corporate venture capital is really an extension of the corporate's view of where they're going in the market and do they possibly have gaps. And in the end, if it's just dependent on the ROE, then usually that doesn't end well. It's that team. The trickiness of a CVC that I've seen is to be effective, you got to be in both worlds. You got to be in the venture world, working with the startup. You also have to be able to navigate your mothership. If you can't do that, guess what? When things get bad, they're the first group to get cut. But, yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I just wanted to add one single thing, which is related to what Mark just said. I think as a CVC, like you obviously want to invest into startups that help you solve core innovative problems that you're trying to solve today. But I think you should also be quite bold and try to invest into the young folks that are trying to put you out of business. Like if you invest into the disruptors that are trying to put you out of business, well, it's better to watch them, invest in them, and work with them.
And I mean, if I may add, the way I understood the question, when it comes to actually structuring, meaning the decision was made that a corporate wants to do it, which is already the more crucial, critical question, maybe about that later. But when it comes to structuring, it comes down to, as in so many respects, to setting the right incentives internally and in a way also externally. By internally, I mean the big difference between corporate VCs versus independent VCs is to figure out how to incentivize properly the people supposed to be, doing the heavy lifting, actually heading and leading the CVC. As an independent VC, you have these established incentive mechanisms where you participate in your own fund's success. A very common and well-established incentive mechanism. Now, a corporate investing from its own balance sheet, from its own, out of its own budget, cannot per se provide the same incentive mechanisms, but there are workarounds. However, they're not that often, I think, they're chosen yet. So that's one critical question to address, because I think sooner or later, if you expect to see real success out of that, you need to be able to reward the people from your organization who made that success possible. But the even more important question is, I think a corporate should be thinking about is whether they should be doing it at all. There are good examples, a few of them, like you should definitely talk to Nicholas here. They're a prime example of how to build a CVC, I think, in a very great way. And it doesn't come about easily, quite the contrary. They started as a shipping company, then built their own software as a service business, and then on top of that, they built their CVC, right? And that was a huge order, I think, to tackle, because it's not just about hiring some people, it's about driving cultural change inside your organization to get to that point eventually, to make that possible. So yeah, definitely talk to him, or talk to Heyman from Innoport, another corporate VC. I think you should definitely seek out these players and ask them for advice.
Nicolas, one advice from you before we move to the next. Sean, I have a good question for you from the audience that
very quick one. I think we were lucky because we were also a young company, and we set up the CVC at while we're still a young company. The only advice I would have, the only two advices I would have is that you need to have a very good strategy of why you want to do the CVC, and I think it should extend beyond the strategy of your own product, right? Be willing to invest on things that are not necessarily, 100% aligned with what you do. And the second one is try to isolate it from the politics and corporate bureaucracies, because innovation needs you to move fast. And again, in our case, that was easy to do because we were also a young startup in the shipping space.
Thank you. Sean, I want to take the next one to you. There is a question from Kathy. Kathy, where are you? Kathy Hodge? Oh, hi. Question about the build-buy partner question. She asked, what are the main reasons you hear from corporates to buying greater than building in-house the solution? As you work with large and diverse corporates, what are the reasons, to build, buy, partner for the corporate?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Just to circle back to the last question. So I think there are a few more people that's worth reaching out to for CVCs related question. Heyman, Innoport, Mark Dragon, Reef Knot for sure, Ayano-san, Mitsubishi, Marina at the back, TMV. Those are great people to talk to. Please reach out to them after. Corporates, okay, so it's an interesting one. So we're backed by a lot of corporates, right? And so why? So I think going back to the whole CVC question, it's a journey, right? So for a lot of, given where we are at the stage of the industry in terms of innovation, we're fairly nascent, right, as an industry. And so a lot of that is how do you optimize for maximum amount of learning, right? So to maximize learning, you want someone to be able to move fast and make a lot of mistakes, right? In a nutshell, that's Motion Ventures, right? We move fast and we make mistakes, right? And then we learn and then we move again, right? So that becomes, so we become almost a risk vehicle, right, for the corporates, right? And over time, that sort of changed in value proposition because we got a larger network, right? And when we have a larger network, that proposition changes to if a few people adopt a solution together, that immediately de-risk from a market adoption perspective, right? Because there's alignment across the value chain. Now, so we invest in very early stage startups, right? As they grow, what's that mean, right? So for a lot of corporates, because the process to spend a few $1 million and the process to spend $50 million is the same, then they'd rather spend it or spend the time when they have to spend $50 million, right? So what is that triggering point for when they start buying? Different people have different objective. I think those are all sort of maybe M&A related sort of thematically direction, right? Do you buy talent? So you acquire talent, you acquire IP, you acquire market, right? You acquire competition, so they're not in the space anymore. I think we're seeing a lot of that, right? A lot of consolidation happening. Kepler is phenomenally good at it the last sort of 9 months. So I think if it's early and you want speed and low risk, you would sort of partner, right? If it's later and you want to jump an order of magnitude, then I think it's just easier to buy most of the time.
Yes, Mark.
On a personal example, more than 20 years ago, I'm back in clean tech, I was right out of grad school, first investment in energy enterprise software. So GE Industry was looking for a software package that could sub-meter an industrial facility, energy, something's malfunctioning, alarming. This is when latency was really poor. You can see the analogy with shipping today. But I give that team credit as I watched them, we invested, and then I watched the industrial team, how they reacted. Was when they assessed the software, I think they admitted it quietly, it's like, we're just not good at coding. We're an industrial company. And then it was a pure NPV of and sunk cost. And then they abandoned what GE was doing internally and went right with that startup. I was impressed because I just think it's human behavior not to do that, because you would have to admit to your higher ups is that you guys couldn't do it, and all that money is now spent, and then we're gonna go with the startup. But that was interesting. So that was a company that, like what you're saying, is they just said simply, we get to market faster to get a better product. We're not great at coding. and we'll invest and have a joint development agreement.
We have the last 5 minutes, and I want to finish this panel because Singapore Maritime Week is bringing interesting and distinguished audience from all around the world. So let's, in 1 minute, for every one of them, approach the audience and ask who you want to meet that you didn't know before during this week, and maybe we will have some good interactions later on in the cocktails. So, Tim, please.
You mean who is it that I want to meet? I haven't met so far. Oh boy, where to start? A lot of people. I think who am I most interested in? Obviously, those people that help me to, well, provide me with a lot of leverage to do what I like to do. And by leverage, obviously, I mean capital, right? That's our job here. All of us, you know, are trying to work very closely with the industry to affect change, to enable and to disrupt. I think it's fair to say both. And so, yeah, I definitely want to meet first and foremost, because you can't spend money if you don't raise money. It's very simple. So in a way, it does start with them. So I do want to meet potential, you know, fund investors. But just as much, obviously, I'm here to meet founders, founding teams, like Sean, like Junir, like Nicholas, basically everyone here. We're looking at early stage startups, right? Having like great teams, great ideas, trying to sell into great markets or market niche sectors, however you want to call it. And yeah, and meet them. And
Okay.
well, that's it.
Sean, who do you like to meet?
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. So I'm looking for people that want to win in this space. They want to make a real difference. They want to change and ready to do the work. And whether you come in as an investor or you come as a founder, I want to play.
Nicolas, final words
Yeah. So
for this panel.
just to add, obviously all of the above. Plus, I think I would love to meet people who are right now in their jobs, maybe in corporates, but they have that entrepreneurial itch and they have the technology acumen and they're thinking of starting something, but they're on the verge. I would love to meet those because we, you know, as I said, we run our own incubation program. We invest in early stage, so these people typically come with a lot of ideas, but it's that safety of the corporate job that keeps them from moving and doing something special.
Mark?
Yeah, so going back to how I started, this younger generation we see in the States, the so-called best and brightest, not all of them from Nicholas's alum school, but many, MIT, they basically come up to us and they say, I can code for anybody. I read about what's happening on the ocean. I don't want to work for Facebook. What do you got? In order for us to help deliver that, and we need industry counterparties, and that's why I'm here, because that's not in Boston.
So you come to meet industry partners. Okay.
Well, same as Mark. Like we want to meet with corporate leaders that are trying to innovate and co-innovate with other large corporate partners. And of course, we want to meet startups that want to work with large corporate partners and also that are looking to fundraise. We announced a couple of weeks ago ZBox Ventures, which does tickets between 50K and 250K with the ambition to do 50 investments per year. So we're very eager to meet founders.
Okay, great, and Godspeed with ZBox Ventures. One more addition to the emerging maritime tech venture world. Thank you all for sharing the insights with the audience. Thank you, dear audience, for being here in this late hour of the day. Please feel free to meet us in the next cocktails around.
Before we end, can we hear why you're here?
Why I came here?
Yeah.
To meet you, all of you. So I already fulfill my dreams of. Obviously, like all, I came to meet the people that I still haven't met yet. So if you are aspiring founders, investors, corporate partners who look for innovative solution, please feel free to reach out. All of us will be here around different cocktails and events in this great week organized by the MPA and the partners. So thanks again for having us, and great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.